sort of had to give myself permission to try and to try to write the stories that were in my head. But for me, I sort of had to get to a point in my life where I was like, I don't care if this goes nowhere. I'm doing this for me. and um and it came, so here's the real story about how I wrote my first book. It came from incredible loss.
Hello, and welcome to So I Wrote a Book, Now What? Where writers chat about writing. My guest today is Gina Banks. She writes steamy rom-coms about strong women and the men who worship them. I can't wait for you to hear all the amazing things she had to say about her writing process. Let's get into it. Gina, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Nicole. I'm really happy to be on your show.
My first question, and I don't know this from all the times that we've talked before, is what made you decide to write a book?
That's a really good question. So I will be perfectly honest that I didn't write fiction until I was in my 40s. So I'm not someone who has been writing stories my whole life. I mean, I always loved storytelling. I was one of those kids growing up that would take down an entire Babysitter's Club book in a day.
Oh, yeah.
Babysitter's Club. My poor parents, I don't know how, I probably had 100, between Babysitter's Club and Sweet Valley Twins. I'm aging myself, elder millennial.
Say hi.
Sweet, yes. I loved this book so much. But I was obsessed with story and storytelling, and I was a theater kid. I did a lot of theater growing up. I did it in college. I've always had these stories in my head, but it really wasn't until I sort of had to give myself permission to try and to try to write the stories that were in my head. And I think for some women, not all women, but for me, I sort of had to get to a point in my life where I was like, I don't care if this goes nowhere. I'm doing this for me. And it came, so here's the real story about how I wrote my first book. It came from incredible loss. So another hat that I wear in another part of my life is that I've worked in politics for 20 years. I ran for a local office. I, really believe in public service. And I went for this really big job in public service. I would have been a full-time public official, and I lost big. I had a huge loss, and I was kind of reeling from it and what I thought the next stage of my life was going to look like. And when that door really closed, I sort of gave myself permission to try something just for myself. And the first book that I wrote, and it is because my local paper, in endorsing the person who ended up winning that race, said that I was too ambitious. And that is why they were not endorsing me. And yes, that did not sit well with me.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, I am ambitious, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's not a dirty word. And it was really from that moment and that experience that this story that had been playing in my head for many years, this political rom-com set on Capitol Hill, that where there was another ambitious young woman who was trying to do some really hard stuff. I wrote her story. So it was basically a way of grieving the loss that I'd had, but I just fell in love with it. And once I gave myself the permission to try, and knowing that, I had nothing to lose, nothing was going to happen to me.
It's still so brave, because sometimes it's so scary to try.
It is scary to try.
It is.
And honestly, this is the weird thing, is I really believe if I hadn't taken that other really big swing and lost, it would have been so much harder for me to try. Because I was like, why am I afraid of big swings? I can do a big swing. I can keep pushing when it gets hard. I can dig deep.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it really, much like becoming a mother for me, like having that experience and it going a certain way made me realize I had a whole new set of gears that I never realized I had, and a whole different set of reserves and resiliency that I never, if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have known. So that is my story of why I
That's so
started
awesome.
writing.
I think that's wonderful. So when you sit down to write a book, do you plot it out or do you fly by the seat of your pants? Are you a plotter or a pantser?
This will probably not surprise you that I am on the plot side of the equation. I am someone who, I like to kind of think about who are these people? What are they going to do? So the first thing for me is like whenever I get an idea, I want to know the main beats of the story, like the main trigger points, the main changes, the catalyst, what's the all is lost moment? What's the midpoint? And so I start with that structure and then I try to fill it in a little bit deeper. And I spend a lot of time with characters. So not only because I write romance, so not
Hmm.
only the two leads, but also like who are the people around them? Like what is the constellation of people in their lives and how are they unique and different, but also how do they reflect parts of these characters differently? Um, so I spend a lot of time in character and just thinking about them and dreaming about them. Um, Kate Claiborne, who's one of my favorite writers, once said that she will sometimes go into like a CVS or a Walgreens and think, what would this character buy here? Like by the time you're done with these characters, I'm a big believer that you're like, you would know everything from like what their order would be at Target, to like what's their favorite book. It's like they're
Hmm.
like real people to you. So I like to plot out, the big stuff, the big beats. I'm a huge fan of Save the Cat, writes a novel. You can see
Same.
it's like even tabbed, highlighted, underlined. And I think, just understanding the structure of the story is really helpful. But I do think that even if you are on the plotter side, leaving room and time and space to be surprised by your characters is really important.
So how do you handle it if you are going on to write and your characters veer off course? Do you
I let them
replot?
veer.
You just let them veer?
I let I let them veer. I let them go wherever they need to go. And then at the end of that, whatever the detour we've now taken, I think, okay, how does this change everything that comes after? And I do, I replot if it needs to happen. So I'm also a really big proponent in like revising forward. So once a character
Hmm.
makes the decision from where I am in a draft, I keep that decision throughout. And then I just make a note of it. Like when you go back and revise, make sure you know that like Steve now has a brother or, whatever
Right.
that decision was. Like if you're spending enough time with the characters, they will tell you what they need to do in a weird way. Um, it's a writing is a weird thing. We're basically hallucinating these people, and they
They're so
talk to you,
bossy.
and they're very bossy. They tell you what they want to do, and you're like, no, actually, could you actually do this other thing? Because that really ties in better with the point I'm trying. No,
I
no,
have
they
an
tell
art.
you what they want to do.
They really do. So do you
Exactly.
write at night or do you write in the morning? Do you have like a set schedule when you write or do you write when it feels right?
Oh, I am all about a schedule. I am the earliest of early birds. I wake up at 5 a.m. every single day, especially when I'm drafting or in the middle of revising. The only time I don't set an alarm for 5 a.m. is if I'm like waiting on feedback and not actively drafting or revising. Um, and the reason for that is like I have two young kids. So my son is 8 and my daughter's 5.5. And they're also early risers. And it's basically the only part of my morning that is quiet. I get about an hour and 15 before, they start asking for breakfast. And so for me, like that's when I'm freshest. I don't drink anymore. So I find that I'm just like more physically awake at that time too. I'm not groggy. I'll have
Hmm.
a little coffee or some tea, but like I'm basically ready to go. And then sometimes I'll have a little bit of time at the end. So I also work a full-time, very intense day job. So occasionally at the end of the day, before the kids come home from after parent school, I'll have another little bit of time. And then on the weekends, I try to do as much as I can, depending on what's going on. So one thing that I think has allowed me to write, I'm now on my fourth book, is consistency. Every single day, I will write at least a little bit. I will bring it on vacations. Like, hopefully, I don't
Same.
annoy people too much.
But the thing
Bring
is,
in my
it's
little
your
laptop.
vacation too.
I know,
Like,
and I
that's
do
what
it
I
so
think.
that I do it early when everyone else is sleeping in. Like no one sees me. I just like sneak off and I do my little writing and then like everyone's awake and we're having fun. So, but I've really noticed, and I don't know if this is true for you too. I'd be curious, like especially when I'm in the middle, either in the middle of a draft or in the middle of a revision, if I take off time, like if I take off a few days or I take off a week, it is so much harder for me to get into the story. And it actually takes me
Yeah.
like a few days to get back into the swing of it. So for me, and I could only write for 15 minutes, but it keeps the story in my head, and
Yeah,
that's what I really
same.
need during that time.
If I have the
Yeah.
habit of it, then I'll just keep going. But like I'm inherently lazy and I want the story to write itself. So if I don't just keep going, I'll be like, do I really need to do that today? But like if the habit's there, then you just keep. Wouldn't it be great though sometimes if it wrote
It
itself?
would have been nice if you could just download your brain and then the story
Hmm.
would just like appear. That would
Hmm.
be nice.
It
That would
would
be
be so
nice.
nice. So do you draft in order? Are all your scenes in order or do you hop around?
I dropped an order. So I have to go from the beginning all the way until I type the end. Sometimes, again, this is like the revising forward thing. So sometimes I will realize, I'm two-thirds of the way in, and I was like, oh, I'm missing a scene at the beginning where this thing should have happened. And then I'll just make a note of it, and then the next draft, I'll come back and write that scene. But yeah, my brain does not. I know some people like see scenes and they're all kind of out of order. And Scrivener is really great for that because you can actually move scenes around. That does not work for me. My
Yeah.
brain is very like A happened, which made B happen, that made C happen. And it always just comes to me in order, not sort of out of order.
Yeah, for me too,
So,
usually. But sometimes I'll think of a scene that's way ahead, but it'll be like my carrot. Like, you get to write that scene once you write all this middle. You have
oh
to
yeah,
write the
no,
rest.
I totally like I sort of usually envision like the grand gesture scene again for romance. Like there's a certain number of scenes like you gotta do like the grand gesture
Hmm.
scene, the all is lost. Like I really love a good grand gesture, and I'll often think of that scene pretty early on, and then I'm like planting the seeds for the eventual grand gesture throughout. So, but yeah, you're right. By the time you get to that scene, you're like, I get
Exactly.
to write it.
Yeah, I feel like if I
Yes.
wrote it, if I gave myself the permission to write it like beforehand, I don't know that I would go and write the middle. I'd be like, the book's done. They're together.
I
It's
wrote, I
good.
wrote the, I wrote to see you guys. I wrote it. Yeah. Well, and also, at least, and again, this is going back to like the grand gesture scene, because for whatever reason, those tend to come earlier to me. Like, I wouldn't know all the nuances of the scene until I've been with those characters for longer. So it almost takes me, 70,000 words to like know how to write that scene, if that makes any
Hmm.
sense. Like,
That
I
does
might know
make
the
sense.
broad strokes, but I don't know how these two people, given everything that's happened to them, would approach whatever that situation is that I've
Right.
created.
That makes total sense. How do you know when your story is done?
Is it ever?
It's a trick
I mean,
question.
that's a total trick question because I guarantee you that I will be one of those writers that um, after a book is like published in stores, everything, I'm at a reading and I'm looking and I'm like, why did I use that word? I'll want
Yeah.
to edit it still. Um, but I think, at least in terms of like, when is it done to query it or when is it done to go on submission? Maybe that's like a more helpful way of answering this. At least for me, when I knew I was ready to queried two books. So the second book I queried, I got offered an representation. But it was when it both was like as far as I could take that story. And I'd done all sorts of revisions. I had done all sorts of things. And especially with the second book, the one that got me the agent, that I would feel confident having it on shelves, like printed as is, like that I felt really good about where it was. And is it done at that stage? Probably not still. You probably still want to like change a few verbs and like move some things around, but where I was like, I can stand behind this book. That's kind of what it was done for me.
How extensive is your revision process?
Extremely,
Just
extremely.
because I follow your Instagram.
I was gonna say it's so extensive, and it's funny because like for me, revision is very iterative. Everyone has to figure out what works for them. But what I found works for me is that with each draft, it's almost like I'm chiseling away at a piece of marble and trying to unearth like whatever the sculpture is in this, you know, hunk of marble. You know, revising the first draft is like a hot mess. The first draft, I fast draft. I just try to get all the thoughts. I just try to get to the end. Second draft is what the heck was I talking about? Like try to make it somewhat readable, understandable to someone who is not my brain. And it's really at
That's a
that
hard
stage, at
step.
least,
It's a
yes,
hard
it is
step to like
so
read
hard.
it as not yourself. That was
Yes.
challenging.
So a trick that I've learned, and I really recommend this, is if you have a Kindle, send that terrible first draft to a Kindle because you can't edit. You have to just read it. And it helps that it's like in a different format than like a laptop. It's not in a Word doc anymore. And for me, that's enough distance to like just be able to read it and look at the big picture stuff, and not make any edits until I get to the end. I make a bunch of notes about what I want to change, but I'm not allowed to edit it. And then you do the edits. And then I think at that stage, that's where you really turn to your critique partners, to like the people that are like your ride or die writing buddies, who you can show, stuff that's like still pretty messy, but who both, I think the critical part of like finding a good critique partner or partners is they should be as serious as you are about the craft. Like they should have spent time studying. They should, be at about the same stage as you in terms of your writing career. And they should both tell you what they love about it, like what to keep and keep you encouraged, and also be really honest about what's not working. So, because you're not going to get better if you don't have a roadmap of like what's really not hitting yet or what needs to change. But I also think especially when you're just starting out, if you only get the what's terrible, it's really hard to like have the energy to do the next revision. So you
Hmm.
want both. You want both, ideally. And I don't know. I mean, is that kind of how it's been for you? Of like,
Yeah.
you want to
When I
have, yeah.
first wrote my very, very first book, I didn't know about critique partners or beta readers or any of that. But there was like a first chapter or something critique that you could pay this company and they would like critique it and it was entered in a contest or whatever and they gave you feedback and it was the first feedback I had received from anyone ever on my writing besides like, elementary school, high school writing, whatever. And I cried. I was so shattered because it was a very honest critique, and didn't know anything about writing a book, even though I've read 10 billion books. And they had one encouraging moment. There was one scene where they were like, "This is a mature scene. This would be in a real book." Like almost verbatim, that's what they said, and I've clung to that still. I'm like, that'd be in a real book. Like it
Hang
was
it on a
nice.
wall.
Hmm. It was the only positive in
Mhm.
there, but I was like, oh, I have a lot to learn. But it was really nice that they included that one nice thing.
We should have included more. I mean, that's
Well,
that's so hard.
There
It's
wasn't.
really hard. And especially, yeah, especially, but like when you're starting out, it's so, and that's why that's why truly, like, I think the most important thing is have people that are at the same stage as you, because the people that are also just starting out are going to understand more of what you're going for and what you're trying to do. And likewise, they are like studying craft books and like trying to take classes or doing, it's like you're working together, you're a team. Whereas
Totally.
sometimes I think if really early on you're like paying for professional help before you're really ready for that professional help to be utilized, it can be crushing. Like, oh,
It was
I'm just
definitely
terrible.
that.
You're just
How
telling me
many?
to like hang it up.
Well, but there was the one good thing, so I was like, not gonna hang it up
Yeah.
because I got that thing,
Yep.
good thing. How many critique
Yep.
partners do you have? Do you send them to?
So, well, I would say like my critique partners at this stage, so I'll just say I'm really, really lucky to have a bunch of people that I would consider critique partners, very close beta readers, people that have read multiple of my books now. And probably my two closest critique partners are my friends Olivia Jackson and Christine Kelly, who I met through Bianca Marie's Beta Reader Matchup. We all write romance of different genres and subgenres, but within the same year, we all got agented and we all went on submission. So,
That's
like,
so
we really
amazing.
did, we like kind of found a cohort, right? And I mean, our group text is insane. Like I probably get 60 text messages from them a day to the point where like if I'm ever like I'm taking a flight tomorrow, I guarantee when I land there's gonna be like 80 text messages that I've missed. So I mean the nice thing is we become friends too, but also like they're the ones that I go to for, when I'm brainstorming the next book, when I'm thinking about like, well, what do you think about this for a comp? Like even more than like the writing on the page, it's really, really just like partners in writing. And then I have a larger group that is super critical for feedback. And I met them through the deep dive series, not last year, but the year before. And that's Mara Williams, um, Isabel Engel, I'm trying to remember her pen name,
Oh
and
yeah, her
Jessica
book is
Banks.
coming out soon.
It is. It is.
Hmm.
So we call ourselves the Sub Club in our WhatsApp group because I created this small cohort when we all went on submission together, and we have beta read for each other. We've brainstormed titles. I actually didn't realize that this was a bucket list item for me, but in Isabel's forthcoming debut, there is a character named after me, which
Amazing.
is so cool.
That is
And
so cool.
she didn't tell me till I read the book and I was like, Isabel. I was like, that was really cool. I mean, the really fun thing about this writing community that you build over time is that I've now beta read like 5 or 6 books that are going to be published in the next 2 years. Like
That's amazing.
that's really cool to be able to like help shape in some small way these books that are going to be on our shelves. That's really neat. And so, yeah, I'm very lucky to have all those people. But I think it's a lot of trial and error, honestly, because again, I'm on book 4 now, but like books 1 through 3, there were other people that looked, I would say like Christine and Olivia have been like there since book 1, but like I've sort of, depending on where I am, where other people are, and just like with writing partners, you want someone who gets what you're doing, who's not going to fight against your voice or your natural style because that is you and that cannot change and should not change, but also helps you figure out how to elevate it.
That's
So,
such an important point because sometimes you just don't mesh and it's not something to do with the technicalities of it or like what's working and what's not. It's just like what's not working for them.
yeah. And I think, we talk so much about like, what is the narrative voice? Like, we all, as writers, we all have like a style and a way that like only we would tell that story. And I
Hmm.
truly believe that like that is the one thing you cannot teach. Like the way that you, Nicole, tell a story is going to be fundamentally different than the way that I tell a story. And that is not something that can be critiqued, in my
Hmm.
opinion. That is because if you try to change that about someone, you're actually just like sanding down the beauty of that person and their voice. So you can talk about like, did this character art work? Or
Mm-hmm.
do you have a grammar mistake? You know, like there are things you can comment on to elevate a story, but in my opinion, voice is not one of them. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you have people reading your work that are saying like, I don't like the way you said this, like if you're giving too much of that comment, then they're just not the right reader for you. It's not a good fit.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point. So how many would you say that your last book had beta readers?
Okay, well, so for book three, it had even less because book three is a little bit of a story. Um, but book two had a lot. So I kind of like had a bit of whiplash. So book one, I had, because it was my first book ever, I had so many people read it because I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And like I had some lovely friends who read it for me who were avid readers and also who were some of like the harshest critics, like said is belovedly, like not in derogatory
Mm-hmm.
manner because I wanted people to read to give me real feedback because I'm like, I don't have writing people yet. And then as soon as I got writing people, it takes a while to figure out like who are the right people for your style and everything. And I would say I really learned that with book two. So I kind of went overboard with like, I wanted to almost like edit it by committee.
Right.
And I sent it,
I tried that.
it's like, maybe if I just let everyone read it and tell me their thoughts, then I'll figure it out. And actually, no, you just get really muddled. And honestly, I had a situation where, so book two, which was the book that got me the agent, the Crimson and Clover is the title. It's the pitch is Mamma Mia, but make it Irish. I love this book so much. We can talk about what happened to the book if you want to, but I loved it so much, and I was getting really good feedback. I hired Savannah Gilbo to do a developmental edit of it. I also hired her for book one, my political rom com, and just seeing the difference in her feedback for the two books, like having hired someone for two, like she was great for book one. Like she gave me a lot of advice about what to change, what was working, what wasn't. Book two, she wrote me like an all caps email that said like, I am obsessed and this is the best thing I've read all year. And like, I
Oh,
mean, just
yay.
like heads and tails, like so excited. So I really felt like something different was happening with that book. And so I was so excited about it. And so I just like shared it with everyone. And then I was preparing to pitch the book in person I had six top tier agents that I was going to pitch to at the Women's Fiction Writers Association conference in person in Chicago. And so I'm like, okay, that's my deadline. It has to be done by then. And, I was planning to query very few people before that because I was like, I don't think I'll have time. I had 6 months to
Mm-hmm.
write the whole thing. And I gave it to I had like two friends read it and two writing friends. And one of them was just like, it's not ready. It's not working. You need to completely redo the beginning. I know you have these appointments. You need to let them go. Like it was basically and it was not said in a malicious way. Like I want to be really
Mm-hmm.
clear. This person was trying to look out for me, like really truly believed these things and was like trying to be a friend. And it really just like threw me because I'm like, it's so different than all the other feedback I've gotten. But like
Right.
maybe I'm deluding myself. And and that's so tough. And as writers, like we're gonna get stuff like this. And
Mm-hmm.
it really kind of knocked me off my feet. And luckily I had the foresight to sign up for a consultation with an amazing agent, Samantha Fabian, with Root Literary. So I had, she had my query and she had my first 10 pages because I wanted someone to review it before I was going to pitch it and query it and all this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had that like a couple days after I got this reaction from a friend. And I just said to myself, okay, depending on what Samantha says, I will decide what the next steps are. Like if she is also like, this is awful, like it's not working, you gotta
Right.
tell that. I probably would have. I would have taken it back and moved on. And I'll never forget that we had a video conference kind of, on the computer. And the first thing she said to me was, reading this, I thought, why are you having this appointment? Because it's perfect. And
Ah,
I was
isn't that
like,
so crazy?
and I mean, we had a great conversation. She's a lovely human. Like, she's not my agent, but she's lovely. And I would recommend her to anyone to query. She's just a spectacular human being. But she saved me in that moment because I was feeling so unsure of myself. And to have someone of her caliber say, no, 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 you've got it, was really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes to show it's so subjective. It's like this whole business is subjective, and we all
Mm-hmm.
have our own lens that we bring to every project. Um, and it really so I queried, 15 agent. It was a very small list. I didn't query it very widely. And then I had the 6 pitch appointments. I had, like 10 full requests at the end of it, and I got an offer like 3 days after the conference. So it
Oh,
was,
that's so amazing. Was it from someone you pitched at the conference? Oh,
yes,
that's so cool.
my agent, Joanna MacKenzie, was one of the agents I pitched in person, and I pitched her on a Thursday, and she offered me rep on Monday.
What?
And she said it's like the fastest she has ever offered representation. I'm only her second client she's ever signed from a pitch. Everyone else has been from the slush pile, has been from referrals, that sort of thing. So it was just sort of like kismet. It was just fate, and um, yeah. So I've been really, really happy with her. But yeah, it just shows that like finding your people is so so critical because it just she that person did not get what I was trying to do. And that's okay. Like
Yeah.
that's fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
I don't blame her at all.
No, of
Like
course
she was
not.
trying to help me. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I go and on Goodreads and I read one-star reviews of books I love just to give myself perspective. Like there's a person out there that gave Beach Read 1 star, and that's a crime. Like that's just
It is.
tragic. But everybody has
Yeah.
their opinions and everybody
And
reads certain things.
people are entitled to their opinions and
Not that one, but I
some
guess
yeah, I mean, they're wrong,
they're
but it's
wrong, but they're
they're
entitled to
they're
it.
wrong. Demonstrably wrong. And this is actually why my friends that are debuting this year, I'm like, you're actually not allowed to go on Goodreads anymore, and you
Right.
need to have an assigned friend who can send you the nice ones, and you are not allowed to be on it actually because it
They
is
should. Oh, that's
so
such a good
hard for
idea.
your mental health.
hmm
Yeah, it's not good. Yeah.
Did you always know that you wanted to go the traditional publishing route?
Yeah, it was always my goal. I mean, to be perfectly honest, like self-publishing, because I have such a demanding career and 2 young kids, like to be successful self-publishing, it really has to be like your job or more of your full-time job in terms of marketing and publicity and putting a lot of time and money into it. And also just like the pace is very different. So I feel very confident that I can write a book a year. I don't think I can write 4 books a year. It's
hmm
just not possible with everything else in my life. So, yeah, for a lot of reasons, it was not of interest to me. But yeah, I totally understand why people take that route. And I think that there is obviously a lot of gatekeeping that happens in publishing, and having the ability to have full creative control and to kind of chart your own destiny. I completely understand why authors find that, super fulfilling. And honestly, most people make, if you're successful, you make way more money indie
hmm
publishing than, for the most part, than if you do traditional publishing. It's just because anything you make is yours, pretty much. So, yeah, but trad was always the way I was going to go.
Do you want to talk about what happened with your book that you signed the agent?
We can talk about it. Well, I think it's actually The reason why I'm okay talking about it is because I think that one thing it's really important for writers to learn is that, like, at every single stage of this process, and, again, I'm going trad, but I think this is also true of indie publishing where, maybe your first book did really well, but then your second book didn't do as well. And, there's rejection everywhere, right? So it's interesting, like, again, my second book, Crimson and Clover, is what got me signed with my agent, Joanna. We did very minimal edits, and then we went on submission. And Joanna is, an A-list agent. She has incredible contacts. She, talked to all these editors before she kind of like verbally pitched them before sending it. It was the best possible launch you could hope for, and it still didn't sell. So that is the hard part of it. It is a historically difficult market, especially for rom-coms, which is what I write. It is really, really difficult to get a deal at this point. And, I really believe that it's an option book. It's a book to have in my drawer.
Hmm.
I really love the book. I really believe in this book. What was really funny is that when it was really clear, unfortunately, some editors ended up not responding, ghosting. So ghosting is still a
Right.
thing with editors, as it is with some agents. For those of you in the query trenches, and so so the other hard thing was, like, it was hard to figure out if it was over because we still had a couple editors who were in theory reading, and so it was like the hardest part for me was this sort of limbo of, like, do I mourn it and move on, or do I hold out hope?
Hmm.
And so in some way, when Joanna sent the final nudge and was basically like, I'm assuming this is a no, there was also a little bit of relief because I didn't have to keep that, like, part of my heart open anymore.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I cried. I cried about it. I got really, really sad, and um, I tried to think. I felt like I was, like, letting people down. It was like,
Oh yeah.
it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard letting go of something. No,
Your
it's just
next book
it's
should
a
have
not
said,
now.
yeah.
It's a not now. And
Hmm.
I mean, here's the other thing about submission: you get one chance at every imprint, one editor, and there probably was a yes with a different editor at some of those
Hmm.
imprints, but it's luck. A lot of it's
Right.
luck when you get to a certain stage. And so I was thinking about, like, how do I commemorate this book that I loved so much, that got me my agent, that got me to this stage. And so I decided to have it professionally bound. And
Oh,
now
that's wonderful.
it sits up on my bookshelf next to my other books because I really wanted to, like, memorialize what I had done. And as I kind of alluded to, the third book I wrote was really meant to be a companion book to the book that was on submission. And
Hmm.
when it was clear, or at least when it was like, oh, it's not selling quickly, like, this did not happen.
Right.
Um, we had to have my agent and I had to have a conversation about, like, is this book three a submission book? Like, is it a big enough hook? Is it going to stand out in this very difficult marketplace? And we both decided that no, it wasn't.
Mhm.
It was never conceived to be that.
Yeah.
So so I also shelved that book, and it's another
Ugh.
book that I really love with characters that I love.
Yeah.
Um,
But shelved it for now.
for now, yeah, I'm like, I've got, like, books three and four in the pipeline. But instead, again, I mean, part of writing is, like, write what you want to write, but also you kind of have to have an awareness of, like, not like, I don't believe in, like, trends in the marketplace, like, oh, I've got to
Hmm.
write these elements, because by the time you write to a trend, the trend is over. I really
Yeah.
believe that. But some of the feedback we were getting is that it was not a big enough book. Like, even the pitch of Mamma Mia, but make it Irish, they were like, it's not big enough. We need bigger. We need more
Gotta
hooky.
be
We
big,
need high
big, big.
concept.
Yes,
Yeah,
high
think of this,
concept.
but like on Mars. No, I'm just kidding, not that. But I knew that whatever we were going to take out to editors again would need to be very deliberately high concept and hooky, and that's what I started writing. I started writing it in June, I think. I started writing it in June. I basically took off the month of July for various reasons. And it's many, many, many drafts later. It is now due. My agent just looked at a draft, gave me some really great feedback, and a more polished version is due to her by the end of the year. So we're going to hopefully go on submission with it very early 2025, like January, February timeframe. So I'm feeling really
That's
good
so exciting.
about it, and it's really different too from Crimson and Clover. It's got a lot of twists and turns. It's a heist rom-com that takes
Oh,
place at the
fun.
Cannes Film Festival. It is a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. So
That sounds so much
um
fun.
yeah, it was so sweet when Isabel read it. She said to me, she's like, "This is the most fun I've had reading like in a year." So
Oh,
I was
that
like,
is the best compliment.
"Yes,
I love
that's
when
what I
something
want."
feels like a vacation in a book.
If I'm doing my job right, it should. And actually, it's funny, the extra layer I'm adding right now is to add more France. So with my
Fun. And you just went
more
to France.
scenery descriptions. I did. I was just at the Paris Olympics last summer. But it's funny, like I haven't been to Cannes for 20 years. So there were some like dusty memories I had to pull out of like what was that like? And yeah, I actually went to the Cannes Film Festival in my 20s, like as a tourist. Let's be like
Right.
very clear, not as like a model or an actress, like as a looky-loo, with a few of my girlfriends. And we actually ended up on the red carpet big screen, the three of us, at a Martin Scorsese premiere. Like it was
Ooh,
wild.
so
It's the
fun.
kind of thing that only happens when you're 20, 21, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
So
I do know.
yeah. I was like, of course we're on the big screen. Look at us, you know. Now I'm like, could
No.
not happen. Uh, yeah, it's the one thing I've really learned through this whole process is that it's okay to mourn the loss, but like get yourself back up and keep on trying. And
Hmm.
I am very stubborn, and I really believe in what I'm trying to do. And I've got a great champion in my agent, and I'm feeling really good about this next opportunity. So I hope that I'm right.
You are. I can feel
I
it.
hope I'm right.
I think you are.
I
Do
hope so.
you have a favorite craft book that you turn to?
Yes, well, I showed you earlier, probably the one I use the most, certainly in like the brainstorming drafting phase. So Save the Cat writes a novel. Also, huge fan of Jessica Brody's courses. She has great courses on her online platform. Because I write romance, I also have to give a shout out to Romancing the Beat. Although
I
it's funny,
love that book.
I don't necessarily do all these because I tend to layer romance over another subgenre, but
Mm-hmm.
Romance at the Beat is also great. And then as you're digging into character, and I think especially in revisions, so there's a couple resources that I really like. The Emotional Wound Thesaurus. Again, like look at how dorky I am with all my tabs.
So many
Um,
tabs.
but this, like, I was just having this conversation with my CP, Olivia Jackson, because she's thinking about her next book. And I was like, but what's their wound? Because once you know the wound, you know where they have to go. You know how to challenge the wound. You know how to find them the romantic partner that's going to like bring it to the surface. You know, like that. Once you figure it out, that helps you figure out the whole plot. I really believe. And then, okay, last two that I'm going to mention, the the emotion thesaurus. Um, so they're not always smiling, smirking, and you can
Oh,
also
so true.
describe how they're feeling in their body. There's also great action. power verbs in here too. And also, speaking of verbs, this is a good one too, 1,000 verbs. Um, and then just like, okay, last one actually is to understand all of this crazy publishing world. And again, this is like trad publishing more. Courtney Baum's Before and After the Book Deal.
I
This
love
was
that
really
book.
critical. Really, really critical. I've given this book to so many people when they get offers of representation. Like Courtney should be giving me a kickback.
Right?
Because
She has really great
I send
classes
like care
too.
packages. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's
She's
such a
awesome.
good book to have.
I met
You've
her
met
at
her?
I met her at the Women's Fiction Writers Association. We actually sat next to each other at a dinner, and she's like lovely. She's like the best and such a champion for writers. She wrote that because she's like, no one talks about this stuff.
I know, no
But
one
this
does.
is it's the most important part of it. I mean, you write a book, but then to your point, so I wrote a book. Now what?
What do
Like
I
that
do?
helps answer it.
Yeah, it does. It really
Yeah.
does. It gives a lot of great advice. There's a lot of stuff in there
Yes.
that I was like, I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all.
Think we need to give this to like partners as well so that when we talk about querying or on submission and they don't know what we're talking about, but like just read the book, okay? And
Just
then you'll understand what I'm
consult
going
the
through.
book, go to the index, find the section,
Just look through it. Yeah.
get back to me. So is there anything else that you would like to share?
I think the biggest thing I'd like to share is, I think there are parts of your writing journey you can really focus on, like honing your craft and I'm a big believer in like read all the time. You learn so much more by reading than in any craft class, but if you are going to take a craft class, take them from CC Lyra.
Mm-hmm.
She's amazing. I've taken every single one of her craft classes, and Bianca Marie also has some amazing ones on her website. But craft is one part of it, but I think finding your people and finding a way with your mental health to be able to keep going is probably one of the most critical parts of this journey. Because no matter, you could have like the biggest unicorn experience ever, which, frankly, I kind of had with my second book, where it was like I pitched it and then I got an agent. It just like happened. You can have a wonderful experience, but like you're going to get rejection no matter what. Like it comes at different times, it comes in different forms. And having a strong sense of yourself, but also a strong sense of why you're writing these books and why it's so critical for you to keep going. Like, what is it inside you that you need to get out in this way? I think that's really, really important. And then by the same token, I think it's really important to have a life outside of writing. I think it's
Truth.
important to find self-worth in other means. For me, it's really I actually really love that I have a very demanding day job that is interesting and uses completely different parts of my brain. I'm a very hands-on mom. I love cooking for my family. Like, whatever those things are for you that provide validation and meaning and joy in your life, don't shortchange them, because I think as soon as you put too much of your self-worth on being a writer or being published or like some accolade, getting the New York Times bestseller list, like whatever that thing is
Mm-hmm.
that you're putting all of your self-worth on, you don't have any control over it. Actually, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those decisions are outside of your control, and so much of it is luck. What you can control is like, how do I feed the parts of my life that actually provide me joy no matter what's happening, and people that love me no matter whether I'm published or not, or made a list or
Right.
didn't. I think that's really, really important. And it's why, like, I have a dear friend, Beth Morris, who was like, so are you going to like, quit your job when you publish? And I was like, I mean, first of all, I live in the Bay Area. Like I can't even conceive of like, I'd have to do like coho numbers of
Mm-hmm.
selling to be able to quit my job.
Yeah.
Like, it's just
Outsell the
too
Bible.
expensive to live here. Yeah, right? Like, So that's like part one. Like, no, we're a double income family, but it's also that like I learned so much through my work, and I get a lot of joy in it. And actually, part of this book four deals with a tech billionaire that made his money from AI. And
Mm-hmm.
I
Oh,
thought
that's
of that
interesting.
character and that scene based on an experience I had at work because I was in a briefing and I was like, oh my gosh, we're doomed. And I don't want to give away too much, but I was
Yeah,
like, immediately the wheels started turning and I was like, I need to write about this
yeah.
actually. And I mean, it's a romance. Like, no one's going to buy this book for my hot take on AI, but like,
But
it's
you needed
also,
to write it as a defense mechanism.
I needed to, there is an aspect of AI that people are not thinking about that is actually probably the most scary part of it in my mind. So I had to write about it.
Yeah.
And I learned about it through my day job. So it makes me think about things in the world in a different way, and it completely uses a different part of my brain. So
Hmm.
it doesn't feel taxing to do both. Which I know some people that are like journalists or do other things within the writing space that can feel like a little too close. So
Hmm.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Well,
that's all I wanted to say.
thank you
my
so
little
much for chatting with me.
my little pep talk at the end.
I love it. I
You
needed
can do
it.
it.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah, it's
funny
just
because like I feel like we all started writing for the joy of writing. I
Mhm.
don't know anybody who started because they're like, I'm gonna make $1 million at this because I'm just gonna whip this out. I don't think anybody started that way, but then like you start pursuing these goals with what you've done, and then it becomes so stressful and there's so much rejection that it's so important to like re-find your joy in other areas of your life and also re-find the joy and like why did you start doing this in the first place?
yes. I think that because writing is so hard, at least for most of us, it's not easy to write. It's not
Right.
easy to do this stuff. If it was, everyone would be doing it. But I think the word that I tried to tell myself, and I actually wrote it on a post-it note and like put it up where I could see it while I was drafting, was just play. And when I was drafting my latest book, because it was a reminder to myself, like, not to take it too seriously. That
Mm-hmm.
the reason why I chose rom-coms to write is because I wanted people to have an escape. I wanted to have an escape. I wanted people to feel all of the feelings and to laugh and to cry and to just play. And if I had that feeling writing it, then hopefully people would feel that reading it. So I think it's important to remind ourselves of like why we're doing this and that it's supposed to be fun. It doesn't have to be fun all
Yeah.
the time. Like, I don't believe in that.
No, it's not.
It's too hard for it to be fun. Like, people that are like, well,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're like, I had a couple of friends who very well meaningly, when I told them that my book had died on set, they're like, well, as long as you're still having fun. And I was like, I'm not right
It
now.
wasn't fun.
It wasn't this happened. I mean, but overall, am I still having fun? Yes. Yes, I'm still having fun. And also, I feel a compulsion to continue to tell stories. So,
Right.
is that fun or is that just something I have to work out? I don't know.
I don't know. Both.
Maybe both. Probably both. Probably
I like
both.
the idea of just play.
Well, and once you get over the hard parts, like, there's so much relief and joy. Like when you get those like little bits of feedback, like those little nuggets that you hold on to. I mean, even with Crimson and Clover, just to go back to that, when I told some of my writing friends, like the ones that had read it were like, how can it be?
Right.
Because a year later, they still remembered parts of the book. They still were thinking about these characters. They still, like, it
That's
lived
awesome.
on in them. And there's no greater joy than when something you have created inspires other people enough that like it has another life within them. Like,
Hmm.
that's why I do this, because
Yeah.
that feeling is so cool. And that other people's work does that to me too. I love that. I love that
That
part of
is
it.
so awesome. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much. I hope we get
Thanks
to
for
do this
having me.
again when your book comes out.
I hope so too. I'm a big believer in, things happen at the time and place they're meant to happen. And especially when like you've given it your all and you like left it all on the field and it didn't go the way that you had hoped it would. It's in my experience in my life, it has always been because something else was meant to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a part of me that looking at these two books, I think book four is a bigger book. I think it is definitely more high concept. It's got a bigger hook. And as much as I love, Crimson and Clover, I can see how this would be a bigger book. I hope I'm
Mm-hmm.
right.
I hope so
Um,
too.
I hope I'm right. We'll see.
I could have talked to Gina for a whole nother hour. She is such a wealth of information. I'm so grateful to have her on the show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll link all her socials. She's on Instagram. She has an amazing Substack. Um, Look in the show notes. It'll all be there. Thank you all so much for being here. Now go write.